Hey everyone, how's it going? Here I'm going to talk about macronutrients. And often I hear, what the heck are they? Well, I'm going to learn you some macronutrients today. If you've ever been on a fitness blog forum or even Instagram, you've probably heard of macronutrients, often referred to as macros. And these are macros are carbs, fat, and proteins, which are the three basic components of every diet. And when you get the proportions of your macros right, it makes dieting a lot more effective than just calorie restriction, which is kind of the go-to uh, thing when it comes to losing weight is restricting calories. And one thing that calorie restriction doesn't take into account is the quality of the food that you're eating and what you're eating. It just focuses on how many calories that you're intaking. If you want to start eating more of the right things, it's better to focus on macronutrients. First, we're going to talk about fats and their role in the body, which is they are essential dietary, molecules that your body uses for energy reserve, which is why you gain fat when you don't exercise a lot and you eat too many calories. It's your body's way of saving it for later. It protects your vital organs, it's insulation, and it also contains a lot of fat soluble vitamins, which is really good for storing them for a later date. They can be found in oils, nuts, seeds, meat, fish, and dairy. Fats also compose your cell membranes. Your cell membranes are made of a lipid bilayer. Lipids are another word for fat. And there's a bunch of different types of fats. There's saturated, monosaturated, polysaturated, but the three you should be concerned about the most are trans fats, omega-3 fatty acids, and omega-6 fatty acids. Trans fats are terrible for you. They are actually not found in nature. We make them basically in a lab by doing some crazy, scary science on them. And fatty acids and omega-6s, I'm sure you've heard, they're in salmon and you want to take fish oil and blah, blah, blah. Well, the point is that the ratio of omega-3s to omega-6s in a food has to be the right ratio in order for that food to be healthy and for the fat to be healthy. So salmon, for example, has a great ratio of omega-3s to omega-6s. I believe it has more omega-3s than omega-6s. And if you switch that ratio to have more omega-6s than omega-3s, it can actually be inflammatory. And so that is actually not what we want. We don't want to be inflamed. We want to reduce inflammation, and that's the way to do it. Fat comes along with each gram of fat has 9 calories, which is another interesting little fact. Next, we're going to talk about, this is the lipid structure of fats. So it has a glycerol molecule at the top, which is the hydrophilic part of the fats. So fats are both hydrophobic and hydrophilic. We call them amphiphilic. So hydrophobic meaning part of it hates water, and hydrophilic meaning part of it loves water. So that's a really interesting portion of lipids. Don't want to get too much into the science of it, but there's a little background for any of you science nerds that are out there. Next, we're going to talk about proteins, and proteins are pretty interesting in terms of what they do. They compose all of your tissues. Everything within your cells is proteins. Hair, muscles, skin, bones, tendons. They are also part of your membranes of your cell as well. In addition to fat, there's things called transmembrane proteins and membrane-associated proteins and all this kind of stuff. They're involved in metabolism, transport, and hormone systems. Enzymes are proteins. They're made up of, if you see the picture on the bottom left, that's an amino acid sequence, and proteins are made of amino acids. Those are the building blocks of proteins, which are pretty freaking cool if you ask me. Also, they're involved in acid-base balance and really important for building muscle. You got to eat a lot of protein if you want to gain muscle. Usually not as much as people think because you can eat too much protein, and it is hard on your liver. Where protein comes from, you can get them from beans, lentils, soy products, peanuts, whole grains, seeds, meat alternative products, vegetables, and animal sources. So many great things. It's really important part of your diet to eat an appropriate amount of protein. Otherwise, you can't repair your body. Next, we're going to talk about carbohydrates. Carbohydrates are actually the only macronutrient that your body can live without, which is pretty interesting. And they fuel you during high-calorie exercise, which is because carbohydrates are the fastest broken down macronutrient that our body utilizes. It's turned from carbohydrates are broken down into glucose, which is what your brain uses, and glycogen. And glycogen goes to your muscles and fuels your muscles for exercise. It spares protein. So if you are working out a ton, you burn carbohydrates instead of burning protein for fuel, which breaks down muscle mass. Not necessarily good. Where you get carbohydrates, you get them from grains. You can get them from dairies and fruits. So some really great places to get them. Carbs are great in moderation. So let's move on to talk about keto macros. So, like I mentioned before, it's much more efficient to keep track of your macros when you're trying to lose weight, because that is a lot better than just calorie restriction. You can eat 1,200 calories of sugar a day, and if you're limiting your calories to 1,200, you're not getting a lot of nutrients and a spread of macros the way that you should if you were to eat only granulated sugar for 1,200 calories a day. If you change that and you're doing 1,200 calories of balanced macros like keto macros, you're eating a wider range of foods, which is really healthy in terms of taking in the micronutrients that you need, micronutrients which are different than macronutrients. Micronutrients include potassium, salt, vitamin B, vitamin A, vitamin E, all that kind of stuff. So the keto macros typically run from 70 to 75% fat. Your caloric intake needs to be 70 to 75% fat, 20 to 25% protein, and 5 grams of carbs. I tell people that they should eat, if they want to get into ketosis, they need to eat under 20 grams of carbs a day, which usually equates to about 5%. There are some keto experts out there that advocate for a larger protein percentage, closer to 30%. And their reasoning behind that is that when you're taking more protein in from your diet, you're not eating as much fat, so that your body, when it's in ketosis and it's burning fat, it has no other option but to burn that body fat. So that is one thing to think about if you are worried about your excess protein intake, because I know it's difficult sometimes taking in too much protein. And eventually, if you eat too much protein, it does eventually turn into carbohydrates or glucose in your body, but that's only in severe excess. So I wouldn't worry too much about your protein intake. Like I said, it can be anywhere from 20 to 30%. So that's the basics of macros. Hope you learned something fun. On to the next lesson.